accept. I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning, everybody. Today, let me get myself set up here for a minute. Today, we're going to complete our discussion of the Noble Eightfold Path, which, as you remember, is part of the first turning of the Dharma wheel, as expounded by the Buddha after his enlightenment. And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that the 8 elements, if you will, are grouped into wisdom, which includes right view and right thinking or intention; ethical conduct, which includes right speech, right action, and right livelihood; and meditation, which includes right diligence, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And we remember that all 8 include all the other 7, and of course they all actually lead to each other and support each other. But today we're going to be talking about the meditation group. And the first element in the meditation group is right diligence, often called right effort. And again, Thich Nhat Hanh relates to this in ways we have previously touched upon, calling them the 4 practices of right diligence. And you'll recognize them. We should be diligent at preventing unwholesome seeds that have not yet arisen from arising. We should help unwholesome seeds that have already arisen to return to our store consciousness. We should find ways to water the wholesome seeds that have not yet risen. And lastly, we should nourish the wholesome seeds that have already risen. Right diligence has at its heart joy, ease, and interest. And you know, when I was thinking about this, I thought people often express to me, and perhaps this is familiar to you as well, just how incredible it is that I've committed to this path. I'm studying the Dharma, I'm sitting meditation, all of it. And this for them is in the vein of, I could never do that. And sometimes I think, yes, wow, how is it that I and all of you do this? You know, it's not easy facing our suffering and doing what it takes to transform it again and again. And it's amazing on some levels, really. But for me, it began with my first reading of the Four Noble Truths and the out loud joy I felt in that moment. And from that moment on, the feeling of ease and interest in continuing. And I don't mean easy, but rather kind of ease, like putting on my favorite slippers. Not easy, but it fits. And how is it sustained? Through interest. An interest that drives us to sit back down, get back up, to devote 2 hours every Sunday to be together here. And Thich Nhat Hanh ends this chapter on right diligence by asking us to look at what brings us sustained joy and ease, to take a look at ourselves in this regard. And he encourages us to spend time with Sangha, what he calls beautifully, I think, brothers and sisters who are creating a field of mindful energy that makes our practice easier. He encourages us to work with a teacher, if we have one, and a friend, to transform our suffering into compassion, peace, and understanding. And of course, to do this with joy and ease. The second element of this group is right mindfulness. And according to Thich Nhat Hanh, this is the very heart of the Buddha's teachings. It is the energy that brings us into the present moment. And when mindfulness is present, so are the Four Noble Truths and the 8 elements of the Noble Path. Mindfulness accepts everything, as you know, with no judgment, no pushing away, and in fact, no reactions at all. Mindfulness includes everything. It's open, inclusive, and loving. And Thich Nhat Hanh says that the practice really is to find ways to sustain it throughout the entire day. And in that regard, he begins by offering us the 7 miracles of mindfulness. Now, the first is being present and able to touch what is in our lives. And examples would include the sky, or a tree, or the smile on our child. The second miracle is to actually make those, the other, in these examples, present also with us. The third miracle of mindfulness is to nourish the object of our attention. Give great loving attention to what is the object of our attention, be it a loved one, our pet, a flower. Discover it again and again with your whole attention. Fourthly, is to relieve the other's suffering. Acknowledge it and be wholly and truly present to it. Then the both of you are present at the same time, and that's when healing can arise. Now, these first four miracles of mindfulness relate to our meditation practice. And you might remember me talking about this, our practice of stopping, calming, resting, healing. It is by virtue of these four miracles that actually we can experience miracle number 5, which is looking deeply, what he had called vipassana, the second type of meditation. And we become able to look deeply at others and to look deeply to ourselves. The sixth miracle is understanding. When we can see and listen deeply, we all know that this can lead to greater understanding and acceptance. It arouses our natural tendency toward relieving suffering and creating joy for ourselves and others. And lastly is the miracle of transformation. And we begin to notice the transformation of our own suffering, and then the suffering of the world. And I'm sure we've all had transformations in our lives that we can point to. Maybe some seem small, or perhaps they've been very life-changing, such as in relation to a harmful habit of smoking or drinking or gambling, for example. These transformations normally are not a sudden aha moment, as you know, although it could be, but rather it's a process, it's a progression. And it's a process that includes all of what we have been discussing since the beginning of this book. These transformations of habit energies take time. But, in Thich Nhat Hanh's words, and I quote, they have the ability to stop the wheel of samsara, the cycle of suffering and confusion that has gone on so many lifetimes. In this same chapter, Thich Nhat Hanh leads us into a discussion of Buddha's discourse on the 4 establishments of mindfulness. And I think they're worth just mentioning each of them here and giving a little detail. And in this, he offers 4 objects for a mindfulness practice, which are already familiar in our practices. And these 4 are our body, our feelings, our mind, and the objects of our mind. But before I go into them, I'd like to read his paragraph that introduces them, because I think it's especially poignant. And I quote him, "The 4 establishments of mindfulness are the foundation of our dwelling place. Without them, our house is abandoned. No one is sweeping, dusting, or tidying up. Our body becomes unkept, our feelings full of suffering, and our mind a heap of afflictions. And when we are truly home, our body, mind, and feelings will be a place of refuge for ourselves and others." End quote. So the first establishment of mindfulness then is practicing mindfulness of the body in the body. And it emphasizes the importance of awareness of our bodies, which are often, in my opinion, neglected, ignored, or relegated to be of less importance than our minds. And here we're asked to just reacquaint ourselves with our bodies and to make peace with them, to smile at our body And that sounds so much like Thich Nhat Hanh. And another tool, as described by the Buddha, is a practice of recognizing the 32 parts of our bodies from head to toe, scanning our body with our mindfulness and observing each part and smiling at it. It's a very healing practice. Another method is to look closely at the elements that make up our bodies: earth, water, fire, and air. And notice and feel that the elements inside of us, which make up our bodies, is not a different reality from all that is outside our body. And in Thich Nhat Hanh's words, we are everywhere. And with mindfulness of the body in the body, we have mindfulness of the feelings in the feelings. Feelings being one of 51 kinds of mental formations that we talk about in Buddhism. And we know this practice, allowing our feelings to arise and acknowledging them and not clinging to them or pushing them away, but rather returning to our breath as one way. And all the while realizing that our feelings are not separate from us. They're not from outside us, but rather they are us. And in these moments, we are them. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, we don't need to be intoxicated or terrorized by them, nor is there the need to reject them. By facing them with care and attention, they can be transformed into a healthier energy. And I like that he compares mindfulness to a loving mother. When her child is sweet, she loves her. When her child is an exhaustive handful, she loves her. And it's like this for us. Everything that happens in our body and mind needs to be attended to equally. The third establishment is the mindfulness of the mind in the mind, our awareness of mental formations, both wholesome and unwholesome. And sometimes a formation can be both. And I like his example of regret. He says that we can feel regret when we hurt someone, and it's wholesome to do so. But if that regret leads to some sort of deep guilt that negatively affects us the rest of our lives and how we act, then that is not wholesome. It's unwholesome. If a mental formation causes pain to ourselves or others, we often refer to it as an affliction or a klesha. And our practice has taught us to simply acknowledge it and recognize it. And we are, as we have discussed, recognizing seeds that are already within us and nurturing those that are beneficial. And lastly, the fourth establishment of mindfulness is that of phenomena, of the objects of our mind. And if we are outside enjoying the wind in the trees, for example, the sound we hear is the object of our mind. So mindfulness on the cushion is very important, but for transformation to occur, actually, we need to practice it off the cushion all day long. And it's mindfulness that transforms mental formations. It is our mindfulness that is the energy of the Buddha within us. And the last element of the meditation group is right diligence or right effort. And again, Thich Nhat Hanh relates this in ways that we have previously touched on, calling them the four practices of right diligence. And you will recognize them. They are about seeds. We should be diligent at preventing unwholesome seeds that have not yet arisen from arising. We should help unwholesome seeds that have already arisen to return back to our store consciousness and find ways, again, to water the wholesome ones that are not yet arisen and to nourish the ones that have. So, sorry. I think I went backwards, you guys. Hold on a minute. Here we are, excuse me. So the last types, sorry everyone. The second type of concentration is, or the third type of concentration is selective. in which I'm sorry, everybody. I've had a problem with my computer and I'm just getting this back together here. Okay, here we go. Sorry. The third element of the meditation group is right concentration. So sorry. The eighth element in the path. And to practice right concentration is to cultivate a mind that is one-pointed. And there are two kinds of concentrations that he talks about: active and selective. And active concentration focuses on whatever is happening in the present moment, even as things change. So this is our practice in which we welcome whatever comes along. And some time ago, I remember in a talk that I spoke of my Dharma name, the second part of which is Kushin, sky spirit. Active concentration is like sky spirit. Whatever appears in the sky is still sky and allows everything to come and go. Clouds, lightning, birds, balloons. This is the active part of concentration. Staying wholeheartedly in the moment, bringing awareness to whatever comes and goes. And this part of my name actually is the aspirational part. So it's something that I'm practicing to embody, to be sky. The second type of concentration is selective, in which we choose an object and bring our full awareness just to that. Think of our experience in the Zendo or yours at home. We hear the birds singing outside. We hear people going about their morning in the kitchen, or the hum of the heater in the Zendo. But our attention remains on our practice, our breath. And it seems to me that selective concentration is pretty much the opposite of multitasking, and more effective, actually, in my opinion. So concentration is our pathway to being fully and deeply present. And according to Thich Nhat Hanh, living in this way in each moment, sustained concentration eventually comes naturally to us. And that in turn gives rise to insight. If you read this chapter, you'll see that Thich Nhat Hanh spends a large part of it discussing various levels of concentration, 9 levels actually. But I've chosen not to go into these at length today, but I encourage you to read this chapter if you're interested in a more detailed explanation of it. But what I would like to share is that these 9 levels are divided into 4 jhanas of the form realm and 5 formless jhanas, with a jhana is a deep meditative state, an absorption, if you will, focused on one object. And when I was practicing in the Theravadan tradition in Southeast Asia, when I was in Thailand, the jhanas were a common topic. And I heard it mentioned quite often. But in Zen, at least in my experience, not so much. But just to say that the first of the 9 of these is still in a thinking state, while the other 8 are thinking gives way to other energies, seeing more deeply into reality. And briefly, just to give you the idea, the 9 are delightful sensations, joy, contentment, utter peacefulness, limitless space, limitless consciousness, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception, and cessation. Cessation of ignorance in our feelings and perceptions, but not the cessation of those feelings and perceptions. At level 9, the seeds that caused us to get so tangled up in our self and non-self are transformed. So there are these 9 concentration practices, but the Buddha actually taught hundreds of them. But there are just 3 that Thich Nhat Hanh highlights as being important for us right now. And you might know them as the 3 Dharma seals, So there's a concentration on impermanence, which we have been doing in our practice all along. And I like his explanation, which he focuses on a loved one, encouraging us to see them as impermanent. Otherwise, we may think that they never change or improve. And he encourages us to simply bring them joy and happiness, as well as joy and happiness to ourselves. And this concentration on impermanence helps us to not get tangled up in the suffering of craving and attachment and despair, which are all aligned with our sense of self. Another practice is concentration of non-self, in which we touch the nature of interbeing in everything we contact. We are all connected. We are not separate. And lastly, the practice of concentration on nirvana, which helps us to touch the ultimate dimension of reality and establishes us in the reality of no birth and no death, the end of suffering. And Thich Nhat Hanh says these three are actually enough for us to practice, because all three are one, and explaining that if we experience the nature of impermanence deeply, we also experience non-self, interbeing, and nirvana. The one contains all. And so here we are together, back at right view, our circle complete. And when I think back on these important teachings of the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, I'm always in wonderment at the brilliance of the Buddha, really. And especially so because of how clearly he has expressed his wisdom, making it accessible and available to all of us, wherever we are in the path and whenever we need or want them. The Buddha is truly with us and in each of us in every moment. Let's take a moment for reflection. And Kate, would you be willing to ring a bell after 1 minute?